Welcome, 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 everyone. I am so glad you're here. My name is Caroline Colas, and I am your host today on the Positive Psychology Hour, a partnership that we do, a program that we do in partnership with the Whole Being Institute. Today, we're going to be talking about positive psychology and the art of leadership with Paul Papierski. Discover how implementing positive psychology practices in all aspects of our lives can make us better leaders. As an organizational development and human resources professional, Paul Papierski has worked with managers and leaders for over 20 years, teaching skills to help them succeed in the workplace. Little did he know that he would graduate from the Whole Being Institute Positive Psychology Program and from the World Happiness Summit Chief Happiness Officer Program with a fresh and empowering take on what it means to be a leader in the workplace and how relevant that is right now. A little bit about Paul, so you know his background. He has an extensive background in employee and manager development, performance improvement, employee coaching, and leadership programs. And he's worked with nonprofits and municipalities, I always have trouble with that word, for more than 20 years. Of course, he's a graduate of the SIP program and the Chief Happiness Officer from the World Happiness Summit as well. And he holds a certificate coach credential from the International Coaching Federation, as well as the Society for Human Resource Management, certified professional credential. And he's the owner, this is really interesting, of North Trail Coaching and Consulting. He helps managers and leaders flourish and succeed at large higher education institutions. Paul resides in southern Vermont, and in his spare time can be found hiking and walking the wooded trails, planning upcoming travel. I'll have to hear about what he's planning for next, and tending to his honey bee hives, which are really important. Welcome to the call, Paul. Let me put you on the spotlight. And thank you. I thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Vermont, huh? Have you been, is it as warm and lovely and amazing in Vermont as it's been this past week in New York City?
It is warm, not as warm as New York City, but warm enough for the bees to still be out and about for their last little bit of foraging. So it's warm. It's in the upper 50s, low 60s, which is great this time.
Awesome. And you must be experiencing on your hiking trails all the changes of color. Yeah.
Yeah, all the changes of color, the leaves dropping as well. And, you know, the world is getting ready to sort of settle in and be quiet for the winter. So yeah, it's this time of transition, I think. So it's quite nice to walk and hike.
Before we get started, and I'll lead us through a meditation, can you just tell me how you even heard about the Whole Being Institute?
Yeah, I was looking for programs in positive psychology, and I stumbled across this one, the Whole Being Institute, and it resonated with me. And so I just, as so many people did, took that leap of faith and jumped into the program, and here we are.
Oh, awesome. And why positive psychology as a leader and as a manager? Was that something you were looking into already? Had you heard about the science? I'm just curious.
I had been introduced to the concept by a friend of mine who had taken a different program elsewhere, who works in the sort of the same field. And he was, you know, raving about the whole concept of what this means and how it can change the workplace and how it can change the way we approach our working lives. And so that got me curious. And without knowing it, I had sort of been practicing concepts of positive psychology on my own for years without even really knowing what it was. And so attending the program sort of put everything together so that, oh yeah, this is actually a thing and I can learn more about it. And off I went. And so I haven't stopped learning since then. So
yeah, I love that Tal Ben-Shahar says, you know, positive psychology is like common sense. It's like what your grandmother or grandparents taught you. You know, it's a lot of good common sense practices, gratitude practices, savoring, you know, looking at, as you were talking about, the honeybees and the trees falling and savoring those moments and connecting and being present, right? So I look forward to hearing more about how it connects with leadership. What I'm going to do now is just get us settled in our own self with a little meditation, and then I'll turn it over to you. Sound good?
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right, everybody, let's go ahead and just push down into our chair. Maybe lift your shoulders up a little bit and then let them drop. Let's do that a couple times. And then more. And then inhale through your nose or your mouth. Circle your hands down. And what we're going to do is we're just going to let our hands, this is called the cleansing organ breath. And you're just going to bring your hands gently down the front of your body in your own pace, in your own timing as you breathe. And just feel that as you do that. And again, it's in a little bit of a circle. And I'm just passing my forehead, my eyes, my nose, my mouth, my throat, my lungs, my heart, all my digestive organs, all the way down towards my chair, towards my seat. And one more time. And this is a breath that you can do anytime. It's from Qigong. It's called cleansing the organs. And imagine just everything settling down so that you can come fully present to this moment right now. Simple practice, but very, very effective. All right, Paul, I'm going to turn it over to you. Let me add you. And I'll be reading the chat. So.
Okay. So you should be able to see my screen. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. Great. And we can see you. We're all good.
Excellent. So great. Thank you. So thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to talk with you all and sort of share what I've learned in my studies and in my time at Holbein Institute. And so I want to talk about positive psychology and the art of leadership and how they sort of dovetail together. And so let's get started. Let me make sure my slides work. There we go. So when I talk about leadership, or when you hear leadership, sometimes you talk about you think about the corporate world and what that means, and leaders have goals and they have competencies and they have all sorts of metrics to follow, and that in some ways is the definition of leadership, or what we know of as leadership from maybe the past. And so on the screen is a list of competencies that I work with now at the University of Massachusetts that managers, somewhat follow: managing people, driving results, building relationships. And when I see this list, it also reminds me a lot about positive psychology, because we are interacting with people, we're looking for results and end results, and we're building relationships. And I'm going to talk more in depth about that in just a second. And so, but before I get into that, on the screen are a whole bunch of leaders. And what I'd like to know from all of you, when you look at these leaders, or you think about leaders that you follow in the news, or that you read, or that you know of when I say the word leader, what common behaviors do they have in common? What behaviors do they have in common? What attributes do they have in common? If you could put some of that in the chat, that would be wonderful. So these people on the screen, or other people that you can think of, what do they do for you as individuals?
We have inspiring, courageous, fairness, visionary, bold, disciplined,
right,
excellent use of language, compassion.
Yeah, excellent. Great. Thank you very much. And, in our studies of positive psychology, one of our main tenets is to help people flourish and succeed. And so when I think about leaders, and I see these leaders, and I think that leaders help us flourish and succeed in our lives and in the workplace. And so I ask us to think about, my slides aren't working quite right. I ask us to think about how are we inspiring others ourselves? How are we helping others flourish in the work and in their lives, in the workplace, if you are in the workplace? Because I think that we are all leaders, and I want to talk about that, positive psychology and leadership for us as individuals besides the workplace. And so I ask you to think about the things that you do outside of our official work capacity. How are you inspiring and helping others? And so, what comes to mind is people who, we do volunteer work, we work in the community, we might have childcare and elder care. How else are you helping people flourish and succeed in their lives? And so if something comes to mind and you want to share that, throw that in the chat, that would be wonderful. I find that having this information and this knowledge around positive psychology is helping me think about myself and the way that I interact in different ways. And so I did have the responsibility of elder care many years ago, and I never really thought of myself in a leadership role or as a leader. But I stepped up during those times, and I made decisions that were hard, but they helped my parents flourish and flourish in the remaining years of their life. And so I think about that as leadership, and I had never thought about it in that way before. So I ask us to think about, how are you leading in your lives now? And so
we have a few in the chat, being
Great.
available to others, to listen to them, and supporting friends and family, empowering others, helping them learn and leverage their strengths. Let's see, we have living my values, right?
Yeah, this is great. I don't even have to talk anymore, because you're all already exhibiting some of the leadership things that I'm going to talk about. So this is great. Thank you. Thank you so much. And so, on the screen is some perspectives and skills that we learned in the Whole Being Institute. I think if you're a frequent attendees of these lunch and learns and this positive psychology hour, you have seen a lot of these already. The SPIRE concept or perspective. I know there's been programs on resilience and hope, etc. I want to talk about just a few of these today when it comes to leadership. I want to talk about the growth mindset, strengths, meaning and purpose, and relationships. And so that's where I want to spend our time today, my time today, our time together, is talking about these four sort of big buckets and how they help us become better leaders in the workplace and in our lives. And so when I think about self-awareness, I think about it in, there's three pieces of this. There are needs, our needs, our values, and our strengths. And so needs are some of our basic things. We as all as humans have needs. And here on the screen, sort of a list of a partial list of some of our needs that we experience. And so this goes way back to Abraham Maslow and his study around needs. And this concept of needs is sort of the basis of the science of positive psychology. And I find it very fascinating, because if we as individuals understand our needs, what they are in the moment or what they are in this time in our lives, that helps us become even more self-aware. And along with values, if we look at our values, right? Most of us have a sense of what our values are. They help us, they guide us in our thinking and how we behave. We like to be in alignment with our values. On the screen there are some words that are values. It's just a small list of values. But they also, when we're in sync with them, we feel in sync and we know it. We know we're on the right path. We know we're on the right, the right trajectory to whatever it is that we're doing. And we also know when we go against our values, how we feel. We feel that something isn't quite working right. It doesn't feel right. We might have a struggle against something. We might be confused or frustrated. And when those things happen, one of the things that we could do is look to say, is what I'm doing, is who I'm interacting with, is the project I'm on, is it going against my values, some core beliefs that I have? And so part of self-awareness is, knowing our needs, knowing our values, and knowing our strengths. And I think that this group has talked a lot about strengths. And I firmly believe in this tool, that if you haven't taken the VIA Character Strength Survey, it's a great free tool to take. And, on the screen are the 24 character strengths, and we all have top 5 or 7. And those strengths are our superpowers. And when we are in line with our needs and our values, and we're tapping into our strengths, then we're like, we're right on track. We know it. We feel motivated and inspired. And overall, we have this sense of well-being and positivity, for lack of a larger word that I can think of right now. And so part of the skill of leadership, especially self-leadership, is knowing ourselves, knowing what we need, knowing our values, knowing where our strengths lie, and knowing that, I can pull on these other strengths when I need them. And so, I like to think about this when we're in alignment. All of these things are in alignment. We're aware of what's happening. We have these 3 E's of self-leadership. And, when you think about the work that you're doing, the people that you're interacting with, if you're in alignment with all of these things, you've got these 3 E's of self-leadership. Things are essential. They feel effortless. They're energizing. You're tapping into all of these things. And so you feel happy and motivated and in balance and ready to take on the world. And so I would ask you to think about, do you feel in that space now? Do you feel that you're tapped into these things? Or can you remember a time when you did tap into these things and you got that glimpse of just, a few seconds or a few hours of being in that zone, of using your superpowers? And that's the thing that I want you to remember. It's pay attention to. And so I can't see the chat, Caroline. So if there are things in there, please let me know.
We're good.
Great.
We just were mentioning that everyone will receive these amazing slides
great.
at
Yep.
the end.
Yep. So if you are not sure of you still have some pieces missing around your self-awareness, as I said, I really do recommend the Via Character Strength Survey. It is a free survey, and there is a lot of information on their website around understanding ourselves and how to use our strengths in different ways. And I could spend hours talking about just strengths, but I don't have that much time. So, but I do ask you to all check it out. And if you want to explore about your values and you're on the internet, on the web, just click around and look for a values assessment. There's many of them out there. I don't have a favorite one just yet, but that will help you sort of put in perspective values and needs and character strengths. So that's one component of leadership, self-awareness. And in the work I do, I teach managers, the more you know about yourself, the better leader you're going to be. How you like to communicate, how you like to interact, how you like to work. And for ourselves outside of work, how we like to be, who we like to interact with, what things do we like to do, when's our favorite time to meet? I will not go to an 8 o'clock in the morning meeting because that's just not my time. But get me at 3 o'clock, I'll do it. All of this comes into self-awareness, right? So let's talk about mindset, another skill and perspective in positive psychology. And I have on the screen here 4 sentences, 2 groups, A and B. And so I would like you to pick one or the other, A or B, which resonates with you the most. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. It's just a point of self-discovery. So what resonates with you the most? Put in the chat, A or B.
I'm getting some B's, lots of B's, some A's.
Yeah.
Before
Yep.
SIP, it would have been an A, and now it's B.
Okay.
It was Beth, Joanne, and yeah, I would say 3, 4, 5, about 6 or 7 B's and about 2 or 3 A's.
Yeah, that's great. So, this is the work of Carol Dweck and her work around mindset and having a growth and fixed mindset. And so, as I said, there's no right or wrong answer. We are born with a combination of both of these mindsets, fixed and mindset, according to this research. And we have predominantly one or the other. But the good news is that we can change our mindset. And so I heard you read a comment from Beth saying, before I went through this particular program, I might have been in a fixed mindset, but now it's in a growth mindset. And that's exactly the skill that we need as leaders in our lives, to be in this growth mindset where we can do anything we set our minds to. We can be successful, we can grow our abilities. And so this is great. I run across people in the work that I do in a fixed mindset. They feel that they can't do anything new, and they don't have the skill, they don't have the intellect to do anything new. And I like to think about, as an example, like people say they can't dance or they can't sing, but you can. And that requires skill, and that requires learning and developing and just taking that sort of step outside of your comfort zone to exercise your mindset. And so as leaders, we want us to be in a growth mindset as much as we can. And I know we sort of flip back and forth sometimes into a fixed mindset, into a growth mindset, back and forth. But I like to ask leaders to be in a growth mindset as much as they can when they do the work that they do. And so I ask us to be in a growth mindset in the work that we do outside of the official work. So as we go about our lives and we are mentoring others, we're building relationships, and we are there for our friends and colleagues and family, how can we stay in this growth mindset? How does it show up for you in your lives? And so I asked that question here on the screen. How does your mindset show up for you? And I hope that it shows up on a growth mindset side, where all of these sort of sentences are there. You like to try new things, experience new things, learn from our failures and our setbacks, and we're up for a challenge now. And so I asked you to think about, how are you embracing the growth mindset in your every day-to-day life?
And I wonder, Paul, if how fear impacts a fixed or growth mindset. In other words, when we're in a state of fear, do we tend to go into a more fixed mindset?
Not being on the expert on this, I'm going to say yes, because we just want to stay in the place that we are most comfortable, we are most secure, and just sort of cocoon and be safe. And so a growth mindset sometimes asks us to step out of that, across our comfort zone, to try something new, to experience other things that we might not have, especially when we're not feeling that safe, so to speak. And in the leadership work I do, there's this whole concept of psychological safety. So in the workplace, we ask leaders to create a space so people are less fearful, they're more safe, they will try new things, they're encouraged to try new things. And so, I ask us as individuals to try to stay in this growth mindset space. And so we can do it. We can change our mindset. And here are some ways to do that on the screen. The biggest way to boost your growth mindset is to be curious and inquisitive and ask questions all the time. Don't make assumptions. We need to open our minds to learning new things, new ways of being, new opinions, etc. And so the more we can ask questions, that we're looking for answers before we speak, sort of using a coaching model, so to speak. Also, people with a growth mindset, they see their failures as learning experiences. This thing fell apart. Okay, great. What did I learn from it? What can I do differently next time? How can I make things better? All that sort of thinking around, okay, yeah, this didn't work, but how can I make it better next time? And I think now, especially now in this endless pandemic, we all have been adapting to change on a regular, almost daily basis. And so the more we can flex with this and understand that, yeah, the end is in sight, it is coming, but everything is changing and it's all right, everything's fine. I'm just going to change, I'm just going to adapt to that, keeps us in this growth mindset that, we can just make this pivot and make this adaptation to whatever's going on. And then lastly, learn new skills and behaviors. And here we are in spending an hour together, potentially learning new skills and talking about what it means to be a leader in our lives. And so what are you doing now for your growth mindset? Does anything resonate with you? Are you asking questions? Are you learning new things? I'd like to hear from you.
So everyone, please put in the chat things that you are doing that invoke your curiosity, or how you're adapting to, are you willing to try new things, which you might not be good at, or how are you adapting even? You might not even be aware, right, Paul, that what you're doing because you've had to change. I think of today, we did our first hybrid class at the JCC. And of course, it was not exactly smooth because it was the first time that we did it. Sometimes the internet went out and sometimes the music didn't work, but we were learning as we went. We learned, for example, I learned that I need to wear a dark color so people can see me because of the mirrors. Ellen says she's trying new ways to exercise. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Joanne says, I'm taking the certificate in positive psychology, a big leap for me. Great. And then learning the ACT model to increase my psychological flexibility. Beautiful. Letting go of assumptions, post-traumatic growth, says Ellen. These are all wonderful things.
Yeah. And, I also ask us to think about the small things that we're doing differently, that we're changing. So, how do we get out of the rut that we found ourselves in? Is it a different type of movie? Are we learning a language? Are we reading a different type of book? Like anything to engage our mind and get it off of the sort of the tracks that it's been on for a long time. And then, you made a great point, Caroline, about, these hybrid classes in Zoom. It's all a learning experience. This whole thing is a learning experience for us. So great. Thank you, everyone.
We have a few more.
Great.
Letting myself be artistically creative, learning to listen better and not make suggestions right away. I led a guided meditation for the first time ever, practicing positive psychology tools with coaching clients. And these are, trying things for the first time. Beautiful, everyone.
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much. All right. So I'm going to move on. And so the third thing I want to talk about is, and keep putting things in the chat. I encourage that. Let's have a lot of participation. Positive relationships. And so I want to talk about what this means for us as leaders individually, and maybe a tiny bit in the workplace. But, I do a lot of work with leaders and managers, and we always talk about relationships. And in positive psychology, positive relationships and resonant relationships and connections are really important. And Kim Cameron in his book talks about 4 strategies for positive leadership. And we could spend a lot of time on this today, but I want to just spend a little bit of time on one of them, which is relationships, and what that means for us as individuals when we cultivate these positive relationships. And so I'm going to ask you to think about right now someone who you enjoy talking to. You don't want to miss a time when you've set up a time to connect with them, whether it's by phone or by Zoom, or you're going to go for a walk somewhere, but an individual that in some ways inspires you and you feel motivated and delighted after the conversation that you have. And think about that person, right? And so I'm hoping that we all have one or more of these people that, you really can't wait to talk to, you look forward to. It's a best friend, it's a spouse, whatever that person is, right? And so this is an example of a great positive relationship, a great energizing relationship. And when I talk about positive relationships, people just sometimes think it's just about getting along. We just all have to get along with each other and it'll be fine. Well, that's a piece of it. It is nice to get along with the people that you're interacting with, but it's so much more than that. If you create these positive relationships, and if you're a part of them, you get much more benefit from it than just getting along. It enhances our health and well-being. And if we talk about it in the workplace, we want to be at work. We want to interact with our colleagues. We want to collaborate more and work on projects together. And it creates this cascading effect upwards of wanting to be with people, this positive emotions. It has a positive impact on our performance and our morale and job satisfaction in the workplace. And if you think about it outside of work, you still get these benefits, right? You still get this cascading effect of, oh, I just had this wonderful conversation with my friend and I feel inspired or motivated to do X or Y, or to get on the phone and talk to my other friend that I haven't talked to in 3 years. But there's an effect from this, there's a lingering effect. And the more that we can create these positive relationships and be part of them, the better off we're going to feel, number one, but it adds to our leadership skills and it adds to us being a leader, ourselves as leaders and leaders in our communities and in our families. And so people sometimes think about, how do I do this? How do I become, how do I build positive relationships? Well, expressing gratitude is one way to do that. So focusing on others, expressing gratitude, acknowledging their successes. So if you're outside of the workplace, acknowledging what's going well, what did they do well, and reinforcing their strengths and their gifts, so to speak. But the other way to do that is also to become a positive energizer leader and to being one of those people that motivates and inspires other people, that you have relationships with people and you're the one that people want to talk to, and you're building these relationships. So, I would ask you to think about what that means for you and your lives and how you can continue to build these positive relationships with your family and friends and coworkers, etc. And so when I say positive relationship, does anything come to mind right now for any of you? Do you have a relationship that you just can't live without, per se? You have a certain circle of friends that you've all been meeting during the pandemic and Zooming all the time. Like what has your positive relationships looked like during this time?
Oh, I think this is so profound to talk about the cascading effect of and prioritizing people that you're really looking forward to being with. Nancy's saying stimulating, compassionate, and safe.
Yeah.
Is what, and I'm thinking, one of my best friends just flew in from California and we're going to spend some time this weekend. And I'm just so excited because she is one of those people that you're talking about, just solid and fun to be around. As Speranza said, that her book club, her book circle was like that. And anybody else, please put it in the chat. But this idea that, wait a minute, I can be both a positive, energizing leader and I can look for developing relationships at work and seeking out those people that I really feel, kind of a positive uplift with.
Yeah, and if we're stuck in figuring out who those people are, Jane Dutton does a lot of work around high quality relationships, and to begin to, there's a way you can begin to identify which relationships are the ones that give you the most positive boost, the ones that resonate with you the most, and on the flip side of that, the ones that are like, well, not so much, I don't think I want to spend some time with this person. And in some ways it's very simple, make a list, and on the top of the list put the people and the teams and the relationships that you value the most, and at the bottom of the sheet, the bottom of the page, the ones that like, oh, I'm not so happy about going to see this person, or I know I have to do it and it's kind of a drag. And if you can pay attention to what you experience when you interact with some of your friends and colleagues, that's the beginning of understanding where your relationships are that give you the most positive emotions, the most support, the most acceptance, per se, versus the ones that you don't get that from people. And we all have them, and it's a matter of how we choose to interact with everybody. But yeah, book clubs, all sorts of stuff like that have been helpful for us over the pandemic. Yeah.
And we have a few more shares. I've created a positive support group since the pandemic. My favorite people are the ones who are authentic and the ones that make me want to be a better person. Ellen says, my cousin, wonderfully compassionate and supportive. And we have this, let's see. I love people who share about their lives with me and also want to hear about my life, not just talk about work all the time, right? And this is another one. Let's see, people who believe in you no matter what, people who endorse your essence. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And I think during this time of the pandemic, we have all had more of a realization of who these people are, who there are people who are authentic, who are the people that listen to us, who are the people that support us. And I have even had this discussion with myself and with my spouse about, these relationships over here, they don't feel so authentic. We can't get into these deep discussions where we value each other. It's more these superficial discussions, and I don't have time for that. I feel like I want these deeper positive relationships and more authentic relationships. And so being aware of this guides me in terms of, okay, how will I do things, etc. Great, thank you.
And Ellen was saying, as Maria Serwa says, who's in your choir?
Yeah, exactly. And then fill up the choir with all the people that you want to be in the choir, because that's what's going to give us the most boost and the most positivity from it all are those people. Yeah. And we know the people that don't fit in there. So yeah, great.
Thank you. That's great.
All right, the last piece of this is meaning and purpose. And so this is a big part of positive psychology and the foundation. And so I ask, what in your life gives you the greatest sense of meaning and purpose now? And so it can be actually whatever it is. If you would want to share, that's wonderful. For me right now in this moment, it's the work that I do. I love the work that I do, leading, helping managers lead, helping people be successful. I find great meaning in that and great value in that. Oh, you're on mute, Caroline.
Yeah, I was thinking, Paul, about your walks in nature. And
Yeah.
for me, just being able to get outside seems to, I know it's not work related, but it seems to help me set up the day in a really beautiful way. And do you find that relationship that you have with your bees and with walking in nature helps you as well?
Yeah, that ties into my my need to be mindful in my mindfulness practice, because I'm on Zoom a lot. I am doing work that keeps me in my brain all the time. And the more that I can reset and get away from that and be mindful, look at nature, be doing something that I'm not always on for, helps me determine what's meaningful, what's not meaningful anymore, and what's working for me right now. So yeah, being outside, and for me, taking these, I live in a very rural area. I live on a dirt road in the middle of the woods. And so it's stepping out my door and being surrounded by nature in an instant. I don't have to go anywhere. I'm lucky enough that I don't have to go anywhere. It does have its downfalls, but for this discussion, it's great. And I could just step right out and I'm there. And so I find it a great help.
Yeah, and I was thinking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and the New York Historical Society has a wonderful exhibit about her right now, and how she had the love of opera, right? And her love of art. And so here was this very, incredible intellect who had to make, decisions and really read through briefs in all kinds of cases. And yet what she did was she really had downtime where she wasn't working all the time, right? We had a question too from Diana. Can you say something more about finding people to be in your choir? And then of course, Beth shared that being a mom and positive psychology has been really helpful. And let's see. Ellen said, I love teaching, let your yoga dance to seniors. Amy said, teaching children online, God's word energizes me like nothing else. And then of course, there's that new blog by Dr. Michael Steger on meaning and work. and being self-employed. Steger is a researcher on meaning and a former speaker on the WBI JCC Positivity Hour. And Amy said, let's see, finding the ordinary in things in the essential, my college art and film festivals. But can you say more about finding your people for your choir?
Yeah, I think that if one way to do it is to focus on things that bring you joy and that you like doing. So I think people that also enjoy those things, you'll find them, you'll make those connections. And so then it begins building a relationship there. So is it possible to do that? Is it possible to get out and do things that you're interested in where you will connect with people? And then hold on to those people, begin those relationships, and they will start off small, maybe just a cup of coffee or a quick phone call, but over time, I think they develop into deeper relationships. And so that's my first sort of thought is, focus on what you love. And I think that you'll find people that resonate with you in those areas that you are focusing on, whether it's exercise or books or theater or whatever it is. That's what I believe. And if someone else has a different suggestion, please share.
I was thinking a relationship even to work. Let's say that somebody joins the staff and they're new. Finding a way to connect with them is important because they're new. You want to make them feel welcome. But how do you connect? And one of the ways, as you were talking about, is what are our shared interests? What do they like to do? Some people have on our Zoom Unity or on our call have talked about their love of exercise or books, clubs or something, asking somebody, being curious, what do you like to read? How far is your commute? Asking those questions and then finding the ways that you connect with one another is a way certainly to start that and to share. I was just on a call with colleagues and we introduced a new person and everyone had to go around and say something that was fun about them, right?
Yeah.
And one woman shared that she still can do back handsprings. Now, I had no idea that she did back handsprings in the first place. But, and then another woman popped on and said, yeah, and she did one in her dress at my wedding. So it just, the whole call became this kind of wonderful, sort of jubilant sharing of different aspects of people's life that we hadn't known about before.
Yeah, so when I work with managers and I teach managers that to do this in the workplace is exactly what you just illustrated, is to ask questions that are positive, that are inquisitive. What went well this weekend? What fun movies did you watch? What skills do you have that are not work related that you want to share? Anything that takes the focus away from work into success and positive things that have happened. People have baking contests at work. They talk about things they baked. They talk about recipes they tried and they failed. Like all these sort of lighthearted discussions begin to form those relationships, begin to form, and you begin to see the connections between people in the workplace. And then you can take it from there. Will it go deeper? Will it stay just in the workplace? It's up to you all. But in the work that I teach managers, it is make that space for that time, for that fun, for that play, to say, what went well? What'd you do this weekend? And you spend time talking about anything but besides work, and it works quite well, actually. So
I would love for you to talk more. I was really curious about you when you said, the better you know yourself, the better leader you will be. So, and also if you could talk a little bit more about, the value assessment. I think everybody here on the Positive Psychology Hour, we're used to thinking about our strengths, but to actually say, wait a second, if I'm uncomfortable, if something is going wrong, or if I feel dissatisfied, maybe I can look at, am I using my strengths? but also is something going against my values? So first, if you could sort of talk more about it, better you know yourself, the better leader you'll be, and how you've used that in relationship with working with, clients and even yourself.
Yeah. So in the work that I do with managers and leaders, a lot of them are first-time managers, new to management, and they're really good at the task that they have in the workplace, whatever that is, right? And then their supervisor said, you are so good at X, we're going to make you a manager. Go for it, with no training, no discussion, just you're really good at doing X. And so now you're in charge of everyone that's doing X. And this is where we find, and I find, that managers, they need to step back a second and understand who they are, what skills they bring to the workplace, how they like to work, how they like to communicate, what's all those things that we sort of take for granted. But when we're in a leadership role, we need to be very clear about who we are in the workplace and who we are as an individual and what our strengths are. And so I believe the more that managers and individuals can uncover that, then they know where they're starting from. They know that, oh, when something is wrong in the workplace, it might just be a sense of work style. We don't have the same style, so let me just change my communication style to talk a little bit differently. Or something's not going right. Maybe it's just because it's not being done the way that I would do it, but there's still a different way to get to the end result. So it's this awareness of who I am, how I like to work, how I like to take in information, what my strengths are, because then we can adapt ourselves to our team in the workplace. We can adapt ourselves in the team, we can adapt ourselves to the team that we're working with, because our role as a manager is to help them be successful. And so the more we know about ourselves, the better we are able to help someone else be successful. And I think that that translates to our lives as well. The more we know about ourselves, the more we can mentor someone or be there for our friends or anything that we've talked about earlier. And I do feel that self-awareness is this grounding of who we are, and it helps us understand who we are in ways that we might not have thought about before.
So if we unpack that in a real practical kind of way,
Yeah.
if I know, for example, like you said, I'm not a morning person, like you said, I'm not having a meeting at 8 a.m., right?
Yeah.
Then we don't have one.
Right. And you don't sign up for a volunteer opportunity that requires you to be someplace after taking 3 buses to be there at 7:30, because it will never work and you'll always fail. But the more you know, I am not a morning person. I know I'm not going to do this, but I can do it over here. I can do it at 10, or that's how it affects us in everyday life. We know what we're capable of, what we like to do, where and when we're at our best. And if we know this, the better off we're going to be overall, both for ourselves and for other people.
Right. And as we were talking about, in the pregame show before this began, the workplace has changed, right?
Yeah.
And we're seeing that some companies are finding it hard to find employees, right? And I was asking you, is that because people are assessing, wait a second, I'm not so sure, as Michael Steger was saying in his article, I want to be sort of the CEO of my own life, right? Yeah. And I'm not so sure I want to work in the same way that I was before the pandemic. I like working at home, and I'm not so sure I feel safe going to Maslow's needs, right? Safety being primary. I'm not so sure I feel safe going back or traveling or doing all those things. So how has that impacted the workforce and the work that you do right now and what we're seeing in the changes?
Yeah, so those changes are everywhere. And so people, as we talked about, are reevaluating what's meaningful for them, why they're going to work. If they were going to work just for 9 to 5 and they didn't really like that job, a lot of them are saying, well, I'm going to go find something else. And so they're tapping into what I go back to what's meaningful for them. And I think this time has given us all this space to stop for a second, a great pause, so to speak, and to say to determine what's important to us. And at the same time, I think organizations have to catch up to say what's important to them. And then how are we going to do business differently? How are we going to accommodate this new way that people arrive at work or approach work? Because we approach work differently now. It's I'm going to be my own CEO of my life, and I'm going to work this job. And if I don't like it, I'm going to figure out another way to go about it. And so just staying in a job for the sake of staying in the job sometimes doesn't work for people anymore. And they have a little bit more awareness around what's important to them and where they want to go. And so I think that, companies need to take that into consideration. They need to take into account wellness for their employees, but in a much bigger bucket than we ever thought about before. And what does that mean? And it doesn't mean I don't think it means 9 to 5 and all the little benefits we can squeeze in 9 to 5. It's much more than that. And each company gets to figure it out. Each corporation, each company gets to figure out what's their culture and how are they going to support their employees. And so it's a very interesting place to be and a very exciting place to be in the world of organizational development and people management, because everything's shifting from what it was even 5 years ago, I think. So,
and there are a lot of pressures on leaders right now, aren't there? Because there's wait a second, pre-pandemic, my profit was X, Y, and Z. Now I may have had to close. I may have had to adjust and go online and purchase new technology. I might have had expenditures. I've also had, layoffs of certain people, and then I'm bringing them back. There's all this transitional activity that's happening, and I need to manage my own time. I hear a lot from managers that they're working kind of around the clock, right, at trying to just get back to the profitability that they had before, or letting that go entirely and just wanting to save the company. And now on top of that, they have a changing workforce that is saying, those aren't meeting my needs.
Yeah. And
I want you to hear me out and let me work from home and, et cetera, et cetera. So the managers, it feels like they're in a little bit of a tough spot.
They're in a terrible spot. And add on top of it, they're just as burnt out from the pandemic as we are. So if we're not managers and the stress that we have dealing with the pandemic and everything that we've been doing, add that on top of if we're a manager and a leader, I'm amazed sometimes at all the work and all the stuff that's happening for leaders right now. But you're right, they have to manage all these new things and keep things rolling forward at the same time. Yeah.
And to your point, a growth mindset and being curious is almost an imperative.
Right. And so that is the skill. That's one of the skills for leaders to have, is this growth mindset, knowing how they like to work. It's imperative that they have that open mindset, that growth mindset. And sometimes it's hard because they want to go back to the way it was. It's more comfortable, it's easy, it's the comfort zone, and it's hard. Yeah.
Can we talk about failure for a minute? Because you were saying in the growth mindset that failure is seen as an opportunity to grow. But when you look at that realistically in the work environment, if you were to go into your boss's office and get your evaluation, and they were saying you're failing at something, that's usually grounds for dismissal. So what kind of failure are we talking about here?
Yeah, sometimes you're right there. Sometimes, I really like to talk to managers about creating the environment that people feel safe in so that they will take risks and try new things. And so on a simple way, if I missed the deadline for the project, or the project wasn't delivered, or something wasn't delivered at the time that it was supposed to, in some ways that's a failure and it's not necessarily a good thing. But if we're in this state of a space, in a team space, where we can try things, and if they don't go exactly according to plan, it's okay. And we learn from this and say, all right, well, we need to tweak this way and add this. that's what I'm talking about in terms of failure as an opportunity to grow. And what does that look like? And I like to think about it in our lives too. What does that mean for us, in everyday to day life? Like, oh, I tried to volunteer something that started at 8 a.m. I realized, oh, that is not going to work for me. And so let me just reshift that around, or I'm going to try to do this and let's see if it works. And then it's all right if it doesn't. Give ourselves a little bit of slack there, permission to be human, and retool and relearn what we're, where we are our best selves, so to speak. So,
I think about that in relationship to exercise. And some
yes.
people will say to me, like, well, do you think that you're going to exercise the same way and do the same thing that you did when you were 10 or when you were 20 or when you were 40 or when you were 60? Like, are you doing the same workout? And the reason I say that is it's like, oh yeah, that's kind of not a good idea. But
Right.
Shouldn't I be doing jumping jacks at 10 and 80? Well, no, not necessarily. Right? So it's this idea of, wait a second, I'm at a different stage. And I think of Sonia Lyubomirsky's work, right? Where personalization is so important, and having a growth mindset and even being curious about what I'm eating and my sleep patterns. And, like there's some flexibility, and we can look and find out what works for us. Tal Ben-Shahar on Learning to Fail. People who achieve great feats, no matter what field, understand that failure is not a stumbling block, but a stepping stone on the road to success. There is no success without risk and failure. We often fail to see this truth because outcome is more visible than the process. We see the final success and not the many failures that led to it. I think that's so true. Thank you for sharing that, Phoebe. And it's also what I'm talking about. Like, don't give up too soon. In growth mindset, Paul, my understanding is that the greatest success for somebody that's quitting for smoking, for example, is somebody that has tried and failed, right?
Yeah.
And then they try again, and they try again, and they try again. Yeah. And it's not, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get there. And the same thing is true with, finding a diet that works for you, finding an exercise program that works for you. Because you've tried and maybe haven't done it before is not an indicator that you can't do it, or that it's a stepping stone, is my point. So don't give up too soon, everybody.
I agree. And I've been struggling with exercise since the pandemic started. And so I have finally landed on 15 minutes a day is what works for me. And so the whole thing about just start something and maybe it'll go longer is great. But if I can get in 15 minutes of movement, not even a formal exercise, I'm doing good. And so it's exactly that. Don't give up, keep trying, find something that works for you, and then go with it, run with it from there. Yeah. Yep.
Gosh, this has been such a wonderful hour spending time with you. Of course, we did the SIP program together, so you're a colleague, and it's nice to get to spend some time with you and really just sort of ask and be curious about how you are seeing this stage as we go back into maybe some companies opening up more fully, to being in person, to being partially online, to having a hybrid world. In March, we will have had the Positive Psychology Hour for 2 years. And I know that when Phoebe and Megan and I started this, there was no way that we thought it was going to be this long. And please let us know, everyone, if you're still finding it helpful and useful, because we certainly are, and we're committed to it. But Paul, thank you for this perspective, because work is a big part of our lives.
Yeah, you are welcome. I'm so happy to be here. I'm happy to talk to anyone if they want to. You'll have slides, you can send them along. There's some contact information in there. So I look forward to chatting with everyone if they choose.
All right. I'm going to, if I can, on my new computer, I'm learning so many things. I'm going to put us on gallery view. And if you're welcome to come off mute and thank our speaker. Andrea said this is very helpful. Elaine said a blessing. Thank you, said Elizabeth. Yes, still finding it very helpful. Thank you, Paul. Great talk. Yes, please continue the positive psychology hour. All right. Thank you, everybody. Caroline, thank goodness for you and these lunch and learn programs, says Esther. And yes, continue the positive psychology hour. Everyone, we are having advances in brain research tonight. If you would like to join us, that is a free program. Please go to Marlene Meyerson, jccmanhattan.com or .org to find out more information. And of course, Nancy will be here next week. And everyone be safe, be well. And as Paul said, be curious. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Caroline. Thanks, Paul.
Welcome,
Well-
bye-bye.
Thank you. It was really informative.
Thank you.
Enriching.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.